8 days ago, this 9-month-old baby swallowed an open safety pin, and no one realized what she'd done. At first, they thought little Raylene Barbic had a simple cold. But as it got worse, her throat became dangerously infected. By the time she was finally x-rayed, 4 days had passed. They operated right away. Since then, she's been on a life support system, being watched 24 hours a day in this pediatric intensive care unit. If you were her parents, this is the place you would want her to be. The people here work as an experienced and well-trained team. But suppose you were a young doctor in a small town and this baby was brought to you tomorrow. Wouldn't it be wonderful if you could get almost immediate help from people with this much experience? Wouldn't it be fantastic if there was a group of senior pediatric intensive care specialists who were somehow connected in a big information circle who could almost instantly give you the best possible advice and instruction? It could save a baby's life on the internet.
In a network of computers, it's not the MIPS and chips and whatnot that's most important. It's what goes on between the people using them that makes them really powerful. A reminder from Sun Microsystems, proud to support this PBS program.
Hello, I'm Scott Simon. Every day the internet is changing the way we live and the way we work, accumulating, sorting, and dispensing staggering amounts of sheer information that becomes instantaneously available. Now, here in the world of medicine, the latest information can mean the difference between life and death. So today, doctors are sharing what they know about life on the internet. The Pediatric Intensive Care Unit in the IWK Grace Health Center in Halifax, Nova Scotia, is much like any similar facility in metropolitan North America. Essentially, two things happen here. One brings unbounded joyous relief, and the other, heartbreaking, inexplicable sorrow. For this is where children either live or die. There's a long-standing tradition in medicine which all the good doctors are taught. It is the tradition of sharing knowledge and being smart enough to know when and where to look for advice. In the field of pediatric intensive care, there are probably only 100 or so specialists in the world. Dr. Chris Soter, Unit Director in Halifax, is one of them.
You're dealing with unusual problems, rare problems. Especially in pediatrics, they say that over half the diseases haven't been discovered yet, or the number that we know, is less than the number we don't know. So we face critical, life-threatening situations that we've never seen before with some regularity. At that point, getting a lot of data from around the world fast becomes critical to us. Now, for years, we would turn, say, to the Medline computer database and ring them up, do a literature search, and within a very short time have all the published papers on some new rare condition or whatever. But very often, the real stuff that you need to know hasn't been published yet. It's that new or that unusual.
Chris Soter is part of a revolution in medicine, for as the internet grows, it's creating a whole new standard of how the medical business communicates. And even when they have to cope with incomprehensible tragedy, the medical team here recognizes that it's sometimes out of that tragedy that the importance of the internet can come into focus.
Last year, we had a classic conundrum that we face in pediatric intensive care. We had a child admitted with a very acute, very life-threatening pulmonary disorder for which the child required mechanical ventilation, full life support. But we had never seen a case anything like it. And in fact, when we went to the Medline computer, we found about 7 published cases in the entire world literature. And they were fairly old. There was also hints that new research was taking place in a few centers that looked at 1 or 2 cases like this, but of course that wouldn't be published yet. Since we had this child deathly ill, anything that was out there, we'd like to know about it, even if it was in a very early stage of trials or experimentation. So we turned to our subspecialty discussion groups on the internet. What I did was post my case in an anonymous fashion for confidentiality, but describing the case and the findings and the x-ray basically on the internet in our intensive care subspecialist discussion groups. Now that basically puts it on a bulletin board for the 100 other people in the world who do my kind of work to look at and share. So within a few hours I was starting to get responses, people saying, yeah, I saw something like that, or I don't know about it, but I know who does, and here's his email address. So then we can follow up on that, and really within 24 hours, we had a sense of what the world knowledge about this rare condition was. It wasn't a heck of a lot, and in this particular case, the poor child went on to die, but it showed us just how quickly information that would otherwise maybe come out once a year at an annual meeting or not at all can come through the internet and help you in managing a difficult case.
The net will make specialists like Dr. Soder accessible to doctors all over the world, and other senior doctors and researchers available to Chris Soder. He communicates with the other pediatric intensive care specialists on his internet discussion group. But there is a fear that anyone who plugs into that group would be able to take part in the medical discussion and have access to the group's information without necessarily having the proper qualifications.
Yeah, and that's really, there's a lot of consciousness about that among docs because we are used to protecting our patients' confidentiality. But it's very tempting when you're trying to get accurate information to put the whole thing on the internet. So really the level of security is quite minimal. Now, I've never seen anyone post a name or a sort of identifying feature about a patient, but certainly entire case histories with names and particulars deleted do appear on our email lists for general discussion. And really signing on to these lists as a specialist is essentially an honor system thing. You declare yourself to the list processor as a specialist in intensive care, give your name, email address, and I don't think there are any great efforts made to check that I really am a pediatric intensivist practicing in Halifax. I mean, they've never even heard of Halifax, much less me sitting here in this ICU when this list is running in California somewhere. But I find that the level of self-discipline in this particular group that I'm part of is very good. And I don't think there's a serious problem at the moment. The potential is there.
And what about someone with no medical experience who might join the group and simply pretend to be a physician?
That's right, and play doctor. But of course, you could pretend to be a surgeon and get a job in Yellowknife and operate for a couple of years before they might catch you as well. I mean, the risk of imposters is there, sure. It's a little less dangerous in this thing because if you say something stupid on the internet, people will just ignore you.
So Chris Soder and the other pediatric specialists in his discussion group are prepared to take the chance that they might be infiltrated, secure that the internet is actually helping them keep up to date in their specialty. But the net has had another effect on medicine. It's become part of a disease. For in the field of psychiatry, a New York definition of internet addiction has recently worked its way into the medical literature. If you think this is simply a bit of a joke, you might be amused to know that originally so did the psychiatrist who first defined it, for it was actually an attempt at satire aimed at the psychiatric profession. And Lexington Avenue's Dr. Ivan Goldberg was amazed and bemused when the profession took it seriously.
A lot of people wrote back, even though I'd clearly labeled it as being a parody, that it isn't such a parody. They, in fact, had it, and that they had patients who had it.
Abby Hoffman and Kevin Hughes are roommates and workmates. They make a living building and selling worldwide websites. So they're on the internet for most of their working day. What they discovered, however, is that they're also spending most of their evenings, their nights, their weekends, and their vacations in cyberspace.
There have been times where we've been on all day, but not straight. I mean, we do other things too. We're not zombies.
They'll spend hours and hours and hours on the net, communicating with people all over the world, and occasionally even with each other.
If we're already talking to each other online, rather than break our concentration by turning around and saying X, Y, and Z, I'll just, send them a secret message online and say X, Y, and Z there. I mean, you don't even notice you're doing it until you actually say, oh my God, he's sitting right behind me, I have a mouth, use it,
What Abby and Kevin are exhibiting here are the symptoms described by Dr. Goldberg when he first defined what he called Internet Addictive Disorder.
Well, first of all, I'm not even happy with the name of the disorder, because the name Internet Addictive Disorder somehow suggests that we're talking about something like heroin addiction or alcoholism or something like that. We're really not. What I think we're talking about is something like workaholism, where somebody simply gets into an activity and overdoes that activity as an excuse for not dealing with other more anxiety-producing, more disappointing, more painful aspects of their lives. So instead of somebody confronting the infidelity of their wife or the drug addiction of their kids or their own depression, they'd rather spend 18 hours a day at the keyboard and, surf the net. So it's not that we're dealing with a truly addictive disorder. It's not that internet is any more addictive than work is addictive. But people can misuse almost anything in terms of their own needs.
Abby and Kevin's particular misuse of the system is for fantasy role-playing on sites in the net called Moves and Muds.
Well, it stands for multi-user dungeon. Once again, it's basically just a place where people from all over the world can get together to talk to one another in a fantasy environment. You can literally recreate anything. If you've ever watched Star Trek or Star Wars and you've always wanted to be one of the characters, well, you can be one of the characters.
It's basically an online role-playing game where you, think up a character, get into the theme of whatever the game is. Kevin's on a Star Trek one, I'm on a Star Wars one here. And you role-play with other people all around the world and hopefully have fun.
Now, how's the longest you ever played a move consecutively?
Well, there was that Sunday where all day, I think. Long times. Not sitting straight doing, because, there's never that much going on. You're lucky if you sit there all day and you get 1 hour of role-playing in. So we'll just leave the computers on, sort of do other stuff, glance back, read email, read news, stuff like that.
I saw a fellow who came to me for another purpose when I was taking a history from him. We were discussing, he was someone who was depressed, and we were discussing his depression and the manifestations of his depression. And in a sense, why it took him so long to come for help. This fellow was a lawyer, and he didn't come for help until his billable hours per month reached 0. And I asked him, would you go to work? He said, yep. And I said, what would you do at work? He said, well, I'd sit in my office, and I'd sit at my desk, and I'd be working on my computer. But his computer screen was facing away from the door, and only he could see it. What in fact he was doing on his computer was surfing the net. And he kept doing this, basically as a way not to face up, first of all, to his own depression, and second of all, to the impact of his depression, which was to make him non-functional at work. And only when finally his billable hours dropped down to 0 and his partners began to say, hey, what's going on here? Did he face up to the fact that he had a depression that required medical treatment?
Sure, it is addiction, but it's not hurting us.
Get a life.
Well, it's not. It's not hurting my lungs. It's not, it's not making me sick or something. A little bit of carpal tunnel syndrome, but that's about it. It's not destructive.
And maybe Abby's right. In a world where there are real problems, a few extra hours on the internet playing on Moves and Muds in a fantasy world doesn't really do very much serious damage, especially when you consider what Chris Soder deals with in the real world, every day of his working life. Dr. Soder believes that even with the major medical advances already in place in cyberspace, his profession still does not move fast enough to embrace the net.
My own prejudice is that we've been behind the rest of the world in using the internet for the dissemination of medical information. I see tremendous potential applications in the next few years. For example, in terms of linking up networks that already exist, right now I can sit at home on my home PC and log on to that monitor up there. That monitor is now being interfaced to the hospital information system. That means that from home, I could, with minimal work, have access to pretty well all the logged data on every patient here in my intensive care unit live. The next stage for me is to be able to share that with remote sites. So that if I'm going to arrange a consultation with a guru in South Africa, I'd like to be able to transfer live data to him and let him analyze it. This could be, sophisticated data like echocardiographic data, monitoring data, or so on, where often having the physician linked up with, say, a voice link and having access to the information and say, can you show me that? Flip channels, look at that, and give immediate feedback. I see that as being technologically very close, but we're doing very little of that, although you see the tendrils starting to reach out.
As you can see these wedge-shaped things under the cortex.
But the truth is, the tendrils have already reached out quite a ways. The next generation of doctors and medical administrators are going to be the products of the age of the internet, sort of digital baby boomers. Students at Cornell Medical School in New York take their early courses in pathology in much the same way as students have been taking them here for generations.
Superior vena cava up and the IVC down. That helps orient it so you know that that's on the left side. Oh, that's a good.
But as these first-year students will find out in the next few months, medical education is going through a dramatic change. They're now being educated with technology unavailable to any previous generation of doctors.
Amyloid appears glassy, homogeneous, and eosinophilic. It is extracellular, deposits around cells.
Even when you do the dissection, you can get very lost because there's so much other stuff there that it's actually good.
Right.
The internet has changed medical school, changed it for the students, and changed it for their teachers. Dr. Kent Sepkowitz, one of the leading authorities in infectious diseases, is on the staff at Cornell.
Historically, medicine has very much had a caste system that the medical students are at the bottom of the food chain or the bottom of the information chain, and the senior professor is at the top of the food chain. And in as much as computer-based learning intrudes itself into the process, it's going to flip all of that over, because I think the person least likely to learn how to get around the net is going to be the senior professor, and the kids are going to know best.
No, it's systemic inflammatory response syndrome.
Final year students Peter Sultan and Benjamin Bailey are now getting information from all over the world on various medical websites.
So how do we get into the pelvis specifically? Was that just a chance drop there, or that's what all they have up?
Yeah, that's all they had was pelvis and perineum yet so far. So now they've got 3D views.
From a student's point of view, this is more than just finding another library. This is being able to access the very best minds on the planet in the various individual medical disciplines. If, for example, the best hip doctor in the world happens to be in Chicago, then presumably Chicago's hip site will be the one most students would want to contact. If the leading edge of heart surgery was in London, that's where they'd go, without leaving their classroom in New York. The next logical step, according to Peter Sultan, will be not just to visit the experts as a student, but actually get a consultation as a practicing doctor with a real patient.
You could bring a patient into your office in the middle of wherever, and it could be a case you've never seen before, and all you have to do is call up your computer, get your camera set, and show the patient to an expert across the country, and you can get a consult right there. And I've heard of things like that happening, although I've never, I personally haven't experienced it, but I hope that in the future I'll be able to do it if I ever, as a physician, run into a case where I don't know what to do, that I'll be able to find the world's expert and get a consult right there, because I have a direct line to them over the internet.
The effect of all this may make medicine more democratic. This information isn't available only to doctors and nurses, but us too. Patients will have access to information that until now was only in the medical libraries. We can have the knowledge to make wiser decisions about treatments, prescriptions, and operations, some of the most critical decisions we can ever make.
It's a whole new way of learning. It's not like going to a book. It's just having thousands of books at your fingertips, and the resources from all those books compiled together by all kinds of people from all kinds of states, all kinds of countries, and thrown together on one computer screen for you to look at. So I think it's incredible. I think that people are going to all of a sudden have a lot more access to knowledge than they ever had before, and a lot quicker. And I think that it'll lead to a lot more collaboration between people in different states and different, different continents, things like that. I think it's a great thing.
Maybe not quite yet, eh? Okay, we're gonna have to do this one more time.
Chris Soder has found that in many cases where children are seriously ill, their parents are using the internet to gather the ammunition they need in the battle for their children's lives.
We're finding that in some of the rare disorders that aren't generally known by the medical population, that the families of the children with these disorders have access to the world literature on that disorder. They will often know everything there is to know about some incredibly unusual disease. And that's a real challenge to the docs, just to stay ahead of the patient sometimes in these specialized areas. But it's a positive thing because, in fact, when the parents are smarter about the disease, they will help us take better care of them. I never see that as a threat. I think to have a well-educated, well-informed, data-hungry patient is great.
Empowerment is an important issue in medicine, but there's a fear that with so many people feeding the system, we'll end up with the confusing inability to decide between what might be useful and what might be bogus. Dr. Sepkowitz, an expert on AIDS, is wary of the assault of too much information.
It gets back to the issue of quality and what gets on there. You want the patient to have full information about everything. You don't want there to be what I myself would worry about would be not credible sorts of information. And I think with AIDS and with cancer and with a lot of diseases that have a certain element of despair around them, there's always the threat that people will listen to what they want to listen to, no matter how not necessarily scientifically sound it might be. So I think that's again the challenge of giving patients and individuals power to find out everything, and yet having there be some way to indicate what's hogwash and what isn't. I think that's keeping hogwash out is a toughie.
It's a bit like sending, you're stranded on the island, you toss a bottle out, and you're waiting for some bottles to come back with the data. And of course, you don't have any way of knowing that you in fact got anywhere near a total retrieval, and I think that's the problem on the internet. You'll catch tidbits and pieces. It's all very beguiling. I'd like to know that there was a way to catch every last reference to Chuchukamuchi fever on the net if I really needed it, and then have it filtered down. And there's no way of really doing that. I mean, the software that's out there now that seeks out information still has to use strategies which will miss some and catch junk. A lot of junk comes in on these searches along with the useful information. We had a rare kind of leukemia that was producing severe life-threatening illness in one of our patients, a case we had never seen locally, knew existed, knew there were specialists researching in that area, knew that new protocols were in development but not yet available and not yet published. And in that particular case, we started the child on a experimental protocol that we got wired to us over the internet. So and that child responded, in fact, to that non-standard chemotherapy and did well. So the success stories are already there, but the potential is much bigger than what we're doing now.
So in the small Canadian city of Halifax, the technology of the internet has moved firmly into the field of pediatric medicine, another tool in the battle to help save the lives of children. And now little Raylene, who swallowed a safety pin, is about to be taken off the life support system. She no longer needs it. The operation was a success. The crisis is over. She'll be released in a day or two and go back to normal life. A complete recovery is predicted by a medical team that believes in life on the internet. If you'd like to check into the world of cyber medicine, here are some places that you might want to start. We found the medical web server at Cornell University to be a good place to begin. Its directory has lots of links to medical sites and the World Wide Web. Here, for example, is a link for cholesterol. A good general site with lots of home information is the Virtual Pharmacy Center. They have listings for the latest medical journals, medical dictionaries, and other reference material. Now, for instance, say I was headed to West Africa next month and I wanted to know what immunizations I might need. I'd click on Travel Warnings and Immunizations, Then I'd go to the CDC travel map information, and then on to West Africa. Here we are at the Visible Human Project. It gives you a very distinctive look into a huge body of information, specifically the human body to be exact. This is an actual flying tour of the human torso. Oh, where to land. Now, another site shows a fascinating blend of art and arteries. It's called the Medical Illustrators homepage. A word of caution, though, like Disneyland, you can't see the entire human body in a single day. There are over 60,000 images that you can download from this site alone. So if you'd like to make your own diagnosis of what's out there, we've prepared a list of links to get you started from our own site. We hope you'll drop by. Now, if you have access to the World Wide Web, you can find us at http://www.pbs.org. Until next time, I'm Scott Simon.
In a network of computers, it's not the MIPS and chips and whatnot that's most important. It's what goes on between the people using them that makes them really powerful. A reminder from Sun Microsystems, proud to support this PBS program.
This is PBS.